everybody's hopefully doing well and enjoying the day and excited for this training. We are. So, before I introduce our presenters, there's a few things we wanted to talk about. First of all, you probably have seen in the email that we sent out. We're trying to let everybody know now that starting in May, these trainings will go to the second Friday of the month. So we no longer will be on Wednesdays. We're going to be on the second Friday. So in May, it will be on May 8th, same time, 10 to 12. So just remember that. April is still on the third Wednesday. May is May 8th. And we'll be sending more reminders out and things like that. But we wanted to let everybody know. Hopefully that will be a good change. I've already gotten some comments from people saying that that's going to work much better for them. And I realize it's not going to be the best for everybody, but no matter what we do, it's not going to be the best for everybody. So hopefully this will be a good one. Also, our code word for today is in keeping with the subject. The code word is prevent. And so that will be the word that you use if you lose connection and want to be readmitted back into the training. You will email Gabby that code word, prevent. I will put that in the chat. I'll send it out right now. And I will put that in again a few times for people that are still being admitted so that they'll see that. We also encourage you for this training, for all trainings, for your questions. It's so much easier if you just put it into the Q&A. Down at the bottom of your screen, it has a little box with a question mark in it. It says Q&A. If it's not showing up, you can go into more with the three dots and it will be in there. And so if you put it in there, then it saves us. It's easy to see where all the questions are, and we can make sure that we're getting those questions answered for you. So if you could do that, that would help us out a lot. We'd appreciate that. And then, as always, remember that our evaluation for your CEUs is put in the chat. The link is put in the chat at the end of the training. Gabby will start putting that in there about the last 15 minutes of the training so that you can get that. She'll put it in more than once. So please make sure to watch. We still continually get emails saying, I can't find the evaluation and things like that after the fact. And then it's just a whole different situation to get you that evaluation. So please, please, please watch for that. I will remind you, we're going to take a little 5-minute break at the midpoint, and I'll remind you again, but please watch for that at the end of the training. Okay, I think I hit all of our announcements. So let's get going. So I want to give these ladies as much time as possible. We have two amazing women who are returning. So they have trained us in January and for our part 1 of this, and now they're training part 2. And so we have Betsy and Karen. They're from Saprea, and which is an amazing organization. I love, love, love Saprea, you guys. I do. And the work that you're doing is amazing. And so they are here to give us part 2 of awareness and prevention of sexual abuse. So I'm going to let them take it over from here. And thanks for being here, lady.
Thanks so much, Kelly. We're so excited to be back with everyone. We're grateful for the opportunity to talk about this issue and to share about Saprea. We're going to go ahead and just remind everybody who Saprea is. Saprea exists to liberate individuals in society from child sexual abuse and its lasting impacts. We do that through our mission. We empower healing for individuals who are sexually abused as children or adolescents through our retreats, our support groups, and our online resources. We educate and engage parents and caregivers to protect children from sexual abuse through our community and online resources. And then we drive a lot of awareness to motivate individuals to take action about this issue. And from a continuum of care perspective, you can see on the slide, on the awareness side, over on the left side, we have resources and campaigns that we use to raise awareness through our social channels. And then as you move into prevention, we have a lot of resources in that prevention slice You can see as you move over to the orange slices, the crisis intervention. Saprea is not a crisis intervention organization, and so we do not have resources there. But as an adult survivor moves into stabilization and ongoing trauma recovery, that's where our resources really come to play. As we move through and talk about resources, I just want you to know, Betsy and I want you to know that we use proven and practical methods for confronting and overcoming child sexual abuse. We have a full clinical team, which Betsy heads up, and an education, research, and outcomes team who help develop all of our research resources, including the presentation that we shared today. Um, Talking all about the
Yeah,
ways in which
Doug
we
Gale
can,
calling. I'm Katrina Overton's brother,
the
and
way
I have a hair appointment set.
Thank you. The ways that we help parents learn how to reduce risk for their kids and how adult survivors can learn how to manage the trauma that they have experienced. Uh, Moving on to our resources being free. I think we mentioned that last time, but just a quick reminder that thanks to the generosity of our founders and donors, all of the resources that we offer are free and available. You can find everything you need to know about our resources on our website at saprea.org. So, jumping into part 2 of our training, if you joined us last time, we're grateful that you're back again. This is an awareness and prevention of sexual abuse training. And how we came to develop this training has to do with SB 205. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with that bill that passed a couple of years ago. It had to do with providing funding for prevention education to be delivered in K through 6 schools. And so now schools can request this education to be taught to children in K through 6, age appropriate education. And along with that, parents of those kids, Saprea provides training and education to parents of those kids. And our training that you are participating in today has been approved by the Utah State Board of Education, has met their very rigorous rubric. And so we will be delivering part 2 of this training. We are we are doing a statewide outreach to parents and community members across the state to help them learn about this training, to participate in the training that we offer. People can become community educators with Saprea and deliver this specific education to parents in their communities. And so the training we offer is free. The access to this education is free. We just want the prevention and awareness to get out there and to support the work that's being done in schools. So if you have an interest in becoming a community educator, please reach out to us in the chat. Go to our website at saprea.org and go to the Prevent tab, and you'll find all the information there available for becoming a community educator and being able to share this education in your communities. So we wanted to just, again, remind everyone the definition of child sexual abuse. And it is defined as any situation where another person, an adult or a peer, forces or coerces a child or adolescent into sexual activity, physical or non-physical. It includes acts or attempted acts of sexual intercourse, sodomy, incest, or molestation by an adult directed towards a child. Sexual misconduct includes any sexual act toward a child that is not safe or appropriate, including pictures, inappropriate jokes, or communication and other grooming behaviors. Sexual abuse and misconduct also includes acts or attempted acts by a child towards another child under certain conditions defined in the law. And in all of these instances, even if the child may not feel uncomfortable, the actions are still considered abuse or misconduct. To put another way, abuse is always defined by the unsafe and inappropriate behavior of the sexual act, not the feelings generated in the child. What is online sexual abuse? Let's talk a little bit more about non-contact forms of abuse facilitated through technology. Online sexual abuse is any type of sexual harassment, exploitation, or abuse that takes place through screens. Some examples of sexual abuse online can include the ones on the slide. So let's just take a minute to review the slide. Given that technology has become such a central part of everyday life, these forms of online abuse often occur alongside abuse taking place offline. A perpetrator may initially reach out to a child online with the intent of eventually meeting in person, or they may use online communications to escalate grooming that has already begun in person. Regardless of how a perpetrator first contacts a child, odds are they will try to integrate technology into the grooming process at some point. We also discussed last time community risk factors. So just a reminder of some of the community risk factors that kids face. So jumping into our topics today, last time we covered the first bullet, which is talk. This time we're going to spend time talking about educate, monitor, and support. I'm going to turn the time over to Betsy now, who is going to jump into educate.
Great. Thank you, Karen. So education, we're talking about continuous open communication, and that's really key to our next prevention strategy, educate. So we teach parents that educating involves having age-appropriate, trauma-informed conversations with their children about sex. And it's understandable that parents want to shield their children from this information. However, it's inevitable that children will hear about it, whether it's at school, online, or from other sources. And we tell them it's best for parents to be their kids' number one source of information about their bodies, sex, sexual abuse, or trafficking, and anything else that they don't want them to learn from someone or somewhere else. And this may feel like uncomfortable territory, both as a parent and then also as a clinician or a peer support provider. Many of us never had, the talk with our own parents when we were young. And so it can be difficult to know what to say, what not to say, or even how to begin talking about topics like sex, developing bodies, or masturbation if you've never had these conversations with anyone. And our own cultural upbringing can affect how we talk to our clients about these topics and how we teach our own children about these topics. So let's explore this a little bit further. So cultural upbringing refers to the set of values, beliefs, traditions, and practices that parents have inherited from their own cultural background and family history. And these can shape their parenting approaches and decision-making regarding safety and protection. And it can also shape how we interact with these topics as professionals working with families. And so with that in mind, I'm going to have Karen drop this upbringing handout into the chat. Can you do that, Karen?
Yep, I dropped the wrong one first, so ignore that one for now. The second upbringing reflection activity PDF.
Okay, perfect. So if you open that up, this upbringing handout, this is an exercise that we give parents when we're doing this training. And it's designed to help people reflect on your own experiences with topics related to sex and how they might influence your approach to discussing these topics with your children. And by understanding your own background, you can make more informed decisions about how to educate your child. And also, since I am talking here to a group of professionals, this can also give you some insight on, okay, how comfortable do I feel and what do I need to look at in talking to clients about these important topics? So looking at this, who remembers doing these like fill in the blank things as a kid? I always thought these were really fun. So when you look at this, you're going to fill in the blanks with the first word or phrase that comes to mind. Don't overthink it. Your initial reactions are valuable. And I know it's hard because you don't have this printed out in front of you. So maybe, jot these down on a piece of paper, but I'm just going to go quiet for a second. And I'd really love it if everyone could complete this handout. All right, I'll give you like one more minute and then, be prepared. I'm going to ask people for discussion. Okay, so hopefully you've had time to complete this and just take a moment to look at your answers. Again, I know it's hard because we're not handing this out to you in person, but I'd like you to consider how your upbringing and experiences have shaped your views on sex. And if you have kids, talking with your kids about it, and also in how you approach this topic with clients. And how might these influences affect the way you approach these topics? And after doing this, did you realize, are there any areas where you'd like to take a different approach than what you experienced? Do you want to do things differently? And I am happy for anyone. Karen, can you see the comments, the chat? Because I can't. So either have you go ahead and put any comments in the chat, or also you can just come off of mute and just share if you'd like.
A comment is, I wish that this topic is not a taboo.
Yeah, I agree. And we're going to talk a little bit about how this being a taboo topic then leads to abuse because we're not talking about it in our society.
Another comment, Betsy, thinking back, I honestly do not remember my parents talking about sex at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard to do, healthy sexuality and sexual abuse prevention when the topic is never, ever mentioned.
Right. Another topic, Betsy, we had one lesson about chastity, quote unquote, in church. Parents never talked about it. I am choosing more education and openness with my own children. Another comment, I learned about it from a friend in school in the fifth grade. Another comment, my parents were great with talking about sex. That is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm a sex certified sex therapist, and I work with a lot of people talking about sex, and it's really hard to talk about. It's hard for our clients to talk about, and as practitioners, sometimes it's hard for us to talk about. So looking at our upbringing and kind of where some of these things come from is important, and that's one of the reasons that we do this activity with parents.
There's a few more comments, Betsy. I had three sisters who were pregnant teenagers. It became shameful. So my pregnancies carried the same shame, even though I was not a teen. I wish it could have been a happier time in my family.
Yeah.
I recall it being a topic that people felt ashamed to discuss. Another comment, my parents used humor when talking about sex, so it wasn't as serious or taboo. That's great.
Mhm.
I think my parents tried, but it felt awkward for me as a kid. Another comment, it was taboo, and my mother associated girls who smoke with sex. So her roundabout way of asking about my girlfriends was to ask me if they smoked.
Which is so confusing to a kid. Yeah.
Still to this day, I'm 26. My dad gets visibly uncomfortable when sex is discussed.
Mhm.
My parents had a book about human sexuality that they left out for us to explore.
Yeah.
As a kid who was being sexually abused, I was terrified to discuss sex. However, I joked about sex with my peers. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's hard. That's a hard position to be in.
Sex talk was shaped a lot by religion.
Hmm. As it often is for people, religion and culture. Yeah. Yeah. I know I personally can still to this day see the book my parents gave me seared in my mind and how uncomfortable it was. So filled with 1970s illustrations. Yeeks. All right, thank you for taking the time to do this. And you'll find that when we do this activity with parents, I think people get a lot of insights on this because obviously all of us as professionals are very well versed in what happens in childhood impacts how we act in adulthood. But sometimes out of the mental health field, this can be something people are like, oh, wow, I'm making some links. So thanks for doing that. So this next couple slides, these are not in our school presentation. So I just want to say that if are a parent of a K-6 kid and your school does this, this won't be in here. But I wanted to add it in because if you're looking for resources to give the parents you work with, or if you're wondering about how do I talk to my own kids, Saprea has our Connect to Prevent series that breaks it down by age-appropriate conversations regarding healthy sexuality. And of course, we always tell people they know, their child best, and these are guidelines based on generalities, not hard and fast. And obviously, if children have cognitive disabilities, you may have to make some adjustments, but the topics are still really important to address. And it can be helpful for parents to say, okay, wow, I can look at this and I can click on a certain age to start to talk about these. So like, if you look here, we have the infant and toddler ones. So, babies and toddlers, they're happily exploring their bodies, and it stresses not to put shame on them for, say, touching their genitals. And this can also help parents know, give them some guidelines in these areas. For school age, you can see a suggestion here regarding explaining different sexual orientations and respect for everybody. And then here's an example of our teen one. Healthy body image is included for this age group, along with talking about puberty and drugs and alcohol. So this can be just a great resource because it gets people at a place to start. And often we hear parents say, I just don't even know how to start talking about anything around the topic of healthy sexuality or prevention or anything. So this is a great resource. Okay, now I'm going to go back to what's in the USBE approved curriculum. We'll go off of my little side journey there. Okay. So we recommend talking about sex, not as one like big talk, like a single thing, but rather as a series of ongoing age-appropriate conversations starting when the child is young. And so a kid may ask, where do babies come from at a noticeably young age? Or they may ask later after they hear kids at school like giggling and talking about it in hushed tones. And these continuous discussions, which will evolve as your child matures, these provide context when they hear or see unhealthy examples of sexual behaviors. So practicing what to say may help prepare you for these type of conversations. So here's a scenario to consider. And again, these are ones that we use with our parents in this training. After your 8-year-old son has spent some time on the family's computer, you browse the search history and see some links to pornographic content. How might you respond to this situation? How might you coach a parent to respond to this situation? And here's an example of what a conversation could look like between a parent and a child in this scenario. Maybe if I can get this thing to go forward. Okay. Is there any chance I could get 2 people out there in my virtual audience to one person to volunteer to be the parent and one to be a child? And just come off mute if you're willing to read this and just say, I'll do it.
I'll do it.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Will one of you start as parent and then the other jump in as child, please?
I'll start as parent.
Thank
I
you.
wanted to chat with you about something I saw in our internet's browser history. I noticed there are some links to sexually explicit videos, and I wondered if you have any questions for me.
No.
I understand if you're curious about what other people's bodies look like, or if you wonder about sex. That's a normal thing for kids to experience.
Okay.
I do want to talk to you about what you saw. Most of the time, pornography is unrealistic. It often makes sex seem violent, and sometimes one person seems to be hurting the other person or making them do something they don't like. Did you see anything like that?
Yeah, I guess so.
I just want you to know that sex is not normally like that. I want you to have real information about sex, which is why we have the family rule about not viewing pornography. I'm afraid that it could affect how you think you're supposed to treat someone else. We can talk more about what healthy relationships look like, but right now, I want to make sure you have a chance to ask me any questions you have.
About what?
Anything. Do you want to talk about what you saw?
Well, there was one thing that made me feel weird.
Okay, let's talk about that. I promise to answer your questions as best as I can. That way, you'll know if you are curious or have more questions in the future, you can ask me about it, okay? So, what did you see that made you feel weird?
Thank you so much, both of you, for volunteering. And that's great. I mean, this would be a perfect conversation, right? Done textbook, which we all know that it's really hard to do in parenting, um, but between a parent and child on this. And if you were at our last training, you'll remember we talked about responding instead of reacting and showed that video with the dad who found out his daughter went to a party and in the first, like a college party with drinking and stuff. And in the first one, he was reacting, and then in the next one, the next version, he responded. So this is definitely an example of responding. The parent was calm and straightforward. And any thoughts on this interaction? Go ahead and put it in the chat, or come off mic, or come on mic.
I see a comment. It was great that the child could ask anything, not shaming, and came from a place of curiosity.
Yeah, I love that because I mean, as you know, we teach so much in mental health. Let's be curious about things, not shaming. Let's notice what our responses are, all of that. So yeah, that was that was good.
This parent has built an open relationship with their kid. If the kid was willing to talk about it at all, it was
Mhm.
appropriate. Another comment, I wish that had happened for me as a child. I too struggled in that area, and I was terrified how my parents would respond if they knew. This scenario made me feel safe.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I like how they didn't jump straight to the conclusion that what the child did was bad, which would have shut the conversation down immediately.
Mhm.
Another comment, the parent encouraged open and future dialogues, even if the child didn't feel comfortable to ask questions immediately. Comment, I don't know if a kid is going to know the phrase sexually explicit, so good point. May want to
Oh, yeah.
open that up a little. Um, Denormalizing pornographic sex.
Mhm.
Some great comments.
Yeah, yeah. And thank you for your responses on that. Those were great, great comments. And you know, it's important to speak with your child about topics related to sex with, like we talked, like your comment said, with clarity, with confidence. You want to do it in a trauma-informed way. And again, that word curiosity, you know, remembering that curiosity about bodies and sex is a normal, developmentally appropriate experience for a child. As a clinician, I know that, and especially in kind of more conservative communities, sometimes talking about sex or even saying, oh my gosh, what if my kid did see pornography and things like that can be really, really hard for our clients. And I think role playing in the therapist's office, I do this a lot with stuff about how are you going to talk to your kid about this? And this role playing with, you know, say the clinician being the child and your client trying this out as a parent can really help boost their confidence. So Yeah, these scenarios are hard to do, and they seem really easy when they're written down, and then when you try to like role play it ahead of time, it can be quite hard to actually have these conversations.
There's another comment, Betsy. I like
Yeah.
that the parent didn't use the word pornography. It has so much shame attached to it.
Could you read that again? I'm sorry.
I like that the parent didn't use the word pornography. It has so much shame attached to it.
Yeah, and I think, and the parent did once, and that's a really, but the other time didn't. And I think that's a really good point because the word pornography can have so much shame attached versus saying, "Hey, I know you're curious about bodies. That's normal." And so talking about it that way. Yeah, good comment. All right. So another helpful tool when it comes to educating our children is teaching them the proper names of body parts. So when it comes to genitalia, we know nicknames abound. I've had, when I worked with kids tell me things and I had no idea they were talking about genitalia. I thought they were talking about something completely different because of the multiple, like there's so many nicknames. Um, and I think most of you know this, but again, this is the information we do for parents. There are reasons that child development experts encourage using the use of accurate terminology. So penis, vagina, vulva. And the first reason is that using nicknames can imply that there's something shameful or naughty about the body. So again, back to that shaming in certain terms. And the unintended consequence can be that a child feels like any discussion about private parts is then off limits. And the child may conclude that asking a parent about sex or discussing changes that are happening in their body or reporting if something has happened, that this will get them in trouble. And then also when nicknames are used, it can make it difficult or confusing for the child to report the abuse, which I am sure our CJC staff here is really familiar with this topic. And then second, armed with the correct terminology about what areas of the body are off limits to others, a child will be more likely to understand if something they've experienced needs to be reported to a trusted adult. And they'll also have the words they need to explain what happened. And it's also important for you to teach your child the words and phrases they need to describe when they feel mixed up or uncomfortable, right? So they need body part words, and then they also need to say, something doesn't feel right, teaching them that too. So an example for the kids like K through 12 of the, K through 12, sorry, K through 2 of this would be, I need help. This doesn't feel right. I want to go home. Those are really accessible phrases to teach kindergartner through second grade. Third and fourth graders, things like I need to talk to someone I trust. I need some space. This crosses my boundaries because hopefully you have talked to them about boundaries by this age. Fifth and sixth graders, it might be this feels inappropriate. This situation makes me feel uncomfortable. And really important, I'm feeling pressured to do something I don't want to do. And I want to talk about the importance when we're talking about giving people words of giving vocabulary to children and also to adults who have communication disorders. I feel really passionately about this. My doctorate is in special education, and I did my dissertation around working with kids with communication disorders. And so any opportunity I have to talk about this, and this is not information that's in the USBE. I'm going off script here again, but I just want to talk about this because I feel so strongly. A 2017 study found that 43% of women with language disorders reported child sexual abuse. That's close to half of women with language disorders. And they reported child sexual abuse, many of them after they were given the words to be able to report it. We have to give children and adults with communication impairments the words to be able to say they're being heard and to report that. And that means putting wording with pictures on high-tech augmentative communication devices and also on low-tech, PECs, picture exchange cards. And I've seen phrases on them, things like, my penis is private, and they can push that button. or naked, or I will tell an adult. So for those of you, if you have a child with disabilities, communication disabilities, or you work in that area, just please, it's incredibly, incredibly important because the research that I have read and people I have talked to said it was terrible to not have the words to say someone was hurting you. And so that goes the same for our children without communication, disabilities. We're giving them the words, but we have to be really intentional on those when we're actually having to give them the words on a card or on a AAC device. Okay, I'll get off my high horse on that one now and go back to what we're doing. Thank you for letting me go off on my tangent. All right, safe touch. Another education tool that can help you talk about sexual abuse with clarity and confidence is teaching your child the difference between safe and unsafe touch. And you can explain that safe touch leaves us feeling happy and safe and comfortable. And examples include holding hands with friends, sharing meals, and like warm hugs from loving parents or friends. And unsafe touch is anything that leaves us feeling unsafe, confused, uneasy, or uncomfortable. And unsafe touch can also sometimes feel good to a child. So it's important we note that. But then we tell them, it's still important to share with a trusted adult if there is touching on private parts of the body or touches that someone tells you to keep secret. And this one is really important as bodies respond physiologically to touch, but that doesn't mean that what is happening is not abuse. And so along with differences between safe and unsafe touch, it's important to model and teach children safe and appropriate adult behavior. So some of these examples of appropriate adult behavior, like giving a high five, handshake, or a side hug with the child's permission. And I get so frustrated when I hear parents say, "It's your grandma, go give her a hug." They don't have to. My extended family learned this really quick from me when I would hear them say, "Well, go hug your Aunt Betsy." And I'm like, no, no one has to hug Aunt Betsy. They can wave from the other side of the room. So that's a big one that I think we teach parents, that you don't have to tell your kids to go give someone a hug. That is not appropriate adult behavior. Another one is respecting a child's physical boundaries and requests for personal space. Not touching in private areas unless medically necessary, not being alone with the child unless specifically required for things like counseling, therapy, other justifiable private concerns. Asking for a parent or a guardian to be present when speaking to a child is appropriate adult behavior, and inviting a parent to be close by and keeping the door open for transparency and the comfort of the child, and or being within visual line of sight or earshot of the parent or guardian. And I know for some of you, you may be looking at this saying, well, yeah, this is appropriate adult behavior, but in our training, we like to make this really clear that this is what's expected of adults. These are the boundaries. And so, of course, the inverse of this is inappropriate adult behavior. And I know, again, all of you know this, but we want to make this really clear when we're educating in the community. So the inappropriate adult behaviors, one-on-one private and unobservable interactions between an adult and a child, obviously touching private areas, sexual abuse, forcing a hug or other physical contact, engaging in inappropriate, private, or sexually explicit social media interactions with a child, forcing a child to watch inappropriate videos, sharing personal or intimate details of one's home life with a child, paying more attention to a specific child over others, telling jokes about private body areas, inviting a child to come alone to their home, an event, or in a car without parental knowledge or consent, and then secretly communicating with a child on the phone, things like texting or other forms of digital communication, especially in a sexual manner. And then giving gifts to a child and expecting repayment or something in return. And so with these examples, parents can talk to their children about sexual abuse and or human trafficking in an age-appropriate, trauma-informed way. And here's some other examples of using age-appropriate trauma-informed language to teach your child the differences between safe and unsafe touch. So again, for ages, 3 to 5, these are little kids. We want simple, direct language. Things like our bodies are special. We have private parts that are covered by our swimsuits. Safe touches make you feel happy, safe, and cared for, like when mom or dad gives you a hug or the doctor checks your heartbeat with parents in the room. Unsafe touches might hurt or make you feel scared or yucky. If anyone tries to touch your private parts or asks you to keep a touch secret, say no and tell a trusted grown-up right away. It's their job to protect you. For ages 6 to 8, more details. So your body belongs to you. Safe touches are ones that feel kind and respectful. They are also touches or behaviors you see other trusted adults doing in public, like high fives with friends or a pat on the back from your coach. Unsafe touches are those that hurt, scare you, or involve private parts. No one should ask you to keep touches a secret. If something feels wrong, trust your feelings and tell a safe adult. It's their responsibility to protect you. Also, it's never your fault if someone gives you unsafe touch. And then for kids like ages 9 to 12, they're getting more of a complex understanding. So you have the right to decide who can touch you and how. Safe touch respects your boundaries and makes you feel secure. This includes side hugs from family or a doctor's exam with your parent present. Unsafe touch violates your boundaries, makes you uncomfortable, or involves private areas without medical reason. If anyone, even someone you know, touches you inappropriately or pressures you to touch them, speak up and tell a trusted adult. No one deserves to be abused or afraid. So you can kind of see how that builds in sort of reasoning and complex understanding from a young age up. And again, it's not just a single conversation, it's lots of little talks to talk about these things. And of course, for children with learning differences, you're going to want to tailor that to the specific child, but you very important with learning differences to use clear, concrete examples showing pictures of what safe touch is, so handshakes, high fives. Really simple rules. If touch makes you feel bad inside, tell someone you trust. You're going to want to have even more of repetition in this area. Again, the use of visual aids like stop signs for unsafe touch. And then this one is incredibly important for children with learning differences is practice saying no and getting help. Kids with developmental disabilities, we spend a lot of time working on compliance. And sometimes, like especially in our schools, we do so much compliance that we're never letting them practice saying no. So for children with learning differences, yes, it's important that they start to learn compliance in school and know what to do and everything, but it's equally important that they have that ability to say no and practice doing that. Parents should also teach their children that all adults have a legal responsibility not to abuse or exploit children and that they can be punished for doing so. All children, therefore, have the right to ask an adult to stop any behavior that makes them feel uncomfortable. They also have the right to report any behavior that concerns them to a trusted adult. And this includes behavior that the child sees happening between an adult and another child. So telling a parent who can help about suspected abuse can lead to protecting the person who may be experiencing the abuse. So this could look like telling your kid, hey, if you see another adult or an older child doing something to a child that feels wrong, weird, or uncomfortable, tell me or another safe adult. If there is something going on, then telling me about it will help protect the kid who may be getting hurt. So again, just really clear, ongoing communication is the key. And now we're gonna switch over to Karen is going to talk about another strategy, monitoring. But I know that Kelly wanted a minute to talk about how you get your. Yeah, Kelly, just go ahead. I just lost my train of thought there. Totally. That was bad.
Fine.
Please.
We just thought we'd take a couple-minute break. And so if anybody needed to run to the bathroom or fill up a water bottle, but before you do, we're just reminding you because some people come into the training a few minutes late. We want to remind you, please, 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 if you want CEUs, grab the link at the end of the training. We continually get emails about this afterwards saying, how do I get the link? How do I missed the link? Things like that. And it's just so much easier if you just watch the chat. The last 15 minutes of the training, you will see it. It will be there more than once. And just click on that link and fill that out and you're done. If you have to save it and do it later, that's fine. Just do it by Friday at 5. And that way your CEU will come in next week. Don't expect it till next week, but then it will come in and you'll get it. So please. And also, if you need to be readmitted, I'm getting some people emailing me right now, and I can't watch everything, and I'm afraid I'm going to miss you. So if you need to be readmitted, Gabby is your go-to. We put that in the chat as well. So email her the code word and you'll get back in. So hopefully that gave everybody a chance to stand up and move and breathe, and we're good to go. Thank you.
And the code word is in the beginning of the chat. So you know.
Yes. Thank you.
So Kelly, do you want us to just take a couple more minutes in case people needed to, go get water or
Yeah.
whatever? And
Yeah.
okay.
Sure, that'd be great.
All right, we'll start back up. It's 10:47 here where I am, so we'll just start back up at like 10:50 if that works.
That works great. Thanks.
Great.
And Kelly, it looks like some people are having trouble accessing our documents. And so I want to get you the documents, and if you can include them in the email that you send after the training, just to
Yes,
make sure that
definitely.
everybody has what they need.
Yeah, I've been seeing that. I'm not sure what's happening, but that's a great solution. We'll make sure that we get those sent out. So there is a question in the Q&A. If you guys, I don't know if you want to look at that and maybe answer after, or I mean, somebody just barely put it in. So
The last two questions I see are about the documents and the inability to
in the Q&A part, down at the bottom, there's a little square with a question mark. It says Q&A down the bottom of your screen. I can read it to you if you want me to.
Oh, please read it. For some reason, I'm not seeing it.
That's fine. It says, what do you recommend as far as balancing the need to teach kids boundaries and saying no while also learning compliance? So
Yeah, so that is I think all children need to be able to say no. And I think we want kids to, we have a school system and things set up for the way, like, please sit down at your desk, get everything done. But I think that ability, that importance to say, you also get some abilities to say no. So we can teach that in the home with things like choices. Do you want this or this? Because one is a yes and one is a no, right? And so giving some of those things, incorporating those throughout the day are important. When it comes to children with developmental disabilities, I think setting up situations where they get to say no and you get to respect that is really important, because often there's so many things we're trying to, depending on the disability and things like that, that we're trying to teach them, that it can just seem like it's always just this sort of never ending trying to get compliance. And regardless, all children get to say no, and that's part of being human. And as adults, we get to say no. Setting up situations where no is an option. And we are, certainly with small children, with toddlers, right? Because they love to say no. And so getting that with choices of, yeah, you're going to be okay with whichever one they pick, and they get to practice saying no. But I do, and I guess I could go on forever when talking about individuals with developmental disabilities. But I think it's just so important to make sure that they have the words, and that they also get to indicate preferences and say no about body parts and things like that. And so, and obviously, if you have a child who is 10 and they have a personal aid and they're changing their diaper and things like that, the no is not going to be an ongoing option for 5 hours, but a no can be an option for not right now. Okay, then we can do it in 15 minutes or some things like that, and giving some some abilities and some control there. Do you have anything to add, Karen?
I love what you said. Yeah, I think it's such a hard balance. But I think you start small with small choices that you are comfortable with as a parent, really allowing them that space for exercising that agency and being able to choose is so important. And then coupling that with this is a boundary. We don't do this, we don't do this, but really just starting small and then expanding it as they demonstrate comprehension and capacity.
Yeah. All right, it looks like we are, it's 10:52, so I'm going to turn this over to Karen now. Talk
Thank
about mom.
Thank you, Betsy. The next prevention strategy is monitor. Monitoring your child's activities does not mean constant surveillance, so not the helicopter parent. Instead, it means being aware of the meaningful relationships in your child's life and any risk factors that may occur. So the first element of this is to just trust your intuition. This is an important monitoring tool that your very own internal compass, your internal intuition. When reflecting on someone's behavior, consider the following. Does it seem odd? Does it make you feel uncomfortable? Does it seem to happen all the time or too often? Has anyone else commented or noticed? If the answer is yes, then trust your instincts and act by reporting suspicions. Contacting law enforcement or child welfare authorities who will then open an investigation may just save the life of a child. For those of you who were with us last time, part one of our training, and you got to watch the Uncle Cody video where he was buying his early teen niece a tablet and texting with her, think back to your own gut reactions while watching it or while reading the two grooming scenarios that we covered. Here's another example. Let's say a parent notices that their child becomes withdrawn around a specific relative. The parent also notices that the relative frequently makes inappropriate jokes around the child and occasionally tries to wrestle or tickle the child even after being told to stop. Most recently, the relative has visited the child's bedroom and shut the door. In response, the parent follows their gut by looking further into the behavior and assertively communicating boundaries and concerns to the relative. The problematic behavior continues, and the parent decides to contact law enforcement. When considering situations such as sleepovers, overnight outings, or one-on-one activities with adults or older youth, ensure that proper supervision is given or that multiple adults are present to supervise, especially if the child is with older children or may potentially be alone with an adult. Consider the safety of any isolated one-on-one settings and encourage the child or youth to choose group situations whenever possible. A monitoring tool that can be helpful is this checklist of questions. Is this a new situation or place where my child could be vulnerable? These could be times like, are they going to be undressing? So maybe they're at the pool and they have to get into their swimming suit. Are they going to be isolated from other people? So think through, is this a new situation? Next, who are the people involved? Will there be adults or older youth present that I do not know well? Are there power differences that could increase the risk of abuse? So are there going to be older children with younger children? Are there authority figures with sustained close contact or peer pressure? Will my child be able to alert me or another trusted adult if there is a need or a crisis? What is our plan to monitor technology use? And do I have a plan to check in with my child at a certain time? Once you've gone through this checklist, it'll make it a lot easier to determine if the sleepover or outing is a safe situation for your child. I'm going to share a personal story just to kind of illustrate how important these checklists are and how they help reduce risk. So this is back, I have a teenage daughter. She's not teenage anymore, but during this story, she was 17. She was about 6 months away from turning 18. And it was January of her high school year. And she came to me and said, "Hey, Mom, I want to go to this concert." And I said, "Oh, okay, well, who is it?" And we looked the person up on Common Sense Media, which is a great tool. And the rating indicated, oh, this person is a little edgy, has some language, maybe not something I would choose for my 17-year-old daughter. But in that moment, I realized, okay, my 17-year-old daughter is going to be going to college in 6 months. So she's going to be making all these choices on her own, and she's not going to have me there to guide her or direct her or help her. And so I shifted gears away from that, no, I don't want you to go. This is terrible. Why would you go to this? To, okay, let's learn a little bit more about this situation. And curiosity really saved me that day. And we kind of went through that checklist of, okay, where's it at? Oh, it's downtown. Okay, so you're going to have to drive an hour and 20 minutes to Kingsbury Hall. Okay. Um, so I'm really trying to manage my emotions. Okay, it's downtown. Where would you park? And so we looked it up and we looked for the parking and walked just through this whole checklist of who's going with you. How are you getting the tickets? Are they going to pay you back? What are you going to do before the concert? What are you going to do after the concert? And as we walked through this, it allowed her, and I didn't answer the questions for her, but it allowed her to sort of like problem solve in advance. And so she ended up going to the concert. She actually got home before curfew. She had a really great time, and it actually really empowered her in that situation. So these checklists are really important for us as parents and as you're working with parents to help them learn how to build confidence in their kids, how to help them start to navigate some of these riskier situations, and how to uh, allow them to grow and develop in a healthy way. So again, these checklists are really helpful and really important. Next is online filters. Being in the know also means being aware of how your child is spending their time online. Given that internet devices have become a central part of our daily routines, it's understandable for parents to feel overwhelmed by the risks young people face in the digital era. Luckily, parents can help reduce these risks by monitoring their youth's internet use, including what they are posting online and who they are talking to or in contact with. So monitor your child's browser history. Just takes a few minutes. Open up the browser, see where they've been. Um, Limit screen time and access to devices. So if your child has a device, oftentimes there are some built-in safety uh, limits and screen time access codes. Put those in place. Your router will have some of those as well. So just you have to take that time to educate yourself. Um, Outline approved activities based on your family values. Talk with your kids about what we do and what we don't do, and maybe the reason why. I remember my daughter approached me, she was 14 and really wanted to get Instagram. And we held our rule was 16. And so instead of telling her no, I started to share with her my Instagram and talked about who I follow, why I follow them, that I have a closed account, that I don't let people follow me that I don't know in real life. And so we just would talk through some of those things. And I kind of helped her learn how to use um, social media, that particular platform, by engaging with that platform with me, and helping me give me an opportunity to share what my values were around the use of that platform. And that was super helpful for her. Um, Employing filtering tools that limit and or survey your child's online access. An example is ensuring your child is using privacy settings online and on apps is really important. And staying up to date on digital trends that pose risks and may require additional monitoring. This may include apps or platforms that contain unmonitored chat functions, live streams, shared content, and other potentially risky features. I would also add to that monitoring group chats. I'll just share another personal story. I have two boys, and they were in a group chat, and oftentimes our focus is on online, on social media and internets, but I really found a lot of challenges in group chats with friends. And what we would do is we have our phones, the phones would get turned in at night, and then I would go through the phones on a regular basis. They didn't know when I was going through them, but it provided me an opportunity to see what kind of chat is happening. Are they sharing photos? What does all of that look like? And actually stumbled across a really, really difficult chat situation where it was a group of about 10 boys, and they had singled out one of the boys in the group chat, and um, some of the boys in the chat had become very abusive and using violent language and different things like that. And so I was able to sit my boys down and have a conversation with them about what it means to be a bystander, because they weren't participating in it from the chat history, but what does that mean to be a bystander, and what do you need to do to stand up because this is your friend that this is happening to? And so I just want to add to this conversation about technology that it's not just online, it's not just social media, but those group chats can actually be quite toxic. And so we have to make sure that we're keeping an eye on those things as well. And then this brings us to our last strategy, which is support. Support is about helping a child through ups and downs, nurturing their confidence and resilience, and teaching them that their voice and boundaries matter. So it's important to establish clear rules and boundaries with the older minors or adults in your child's life. One example is communicating boundaries to other adults around your family's values, safety, and privacy. You can explain to others, including your own children, that every family member has rights to privacy in dressing, bathing, sleeping, or other personal activities. An example of a family might be when adults talk with a child in their bedroom, the door should always be open. Or undressing should only occur when someone is alone in their bedroom or bathroom with the door closed. Or when outside one's own bedroom, always wear appropriate clothing such as a bathrobe or a t-shirt over underclothes. As a parent and guardian, you have the responsibility to address and correct any harmful behavior. This means immediately intervening when someone pressures a child for physical contact or dismisses their expressed boundaries. For instance, if a relative insists on a hug after a child has declined, the parent should firmly state, "Oh, we respect their decision. They've said no, and that needs to be honored." You might consider creating a clear protocol within your family network. You have the responsibility to inform other caregivers, relatives, and family friends that you expect them to respect your child's boundaries without question. Address any resistance directly with statements like, "As their parent, I am responsible for ensuring their boundaries are respected. This is a non-negotiable in our family." If anyone does not respect these rights, you should clearly tell them the family rules and monitor to make sure those rules are honored. The parent should also continue to check with their children that those rules are being followed by others in the home. So,
Karen, sorry,
yes.
can I just interject? So somebody, and you probably answered this with what you just stated, but this question goes right along with what you're saying.
Please.
They have a scenario in their family. She said, "I recently had a sister-in-law tell her children, quote, 'You don't have to,' when I reached out to hug, for a hug. I couldn't help but feel like the perpetrator by her comment, even though they normally hug me when they are over. Now I never ask to hug her children and I only wait for them to hug me. I feel less close to her children as a result, and I want to know if there's a better way to teach the option no to kids without making extended family feel bad. I'm teaching my own children. How do I help them?" So I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to add specifically to that, and since you were talking about it right here. So
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. And Betsy, feel free to chime in as well. I think we've been raised in a culture where hugging is more normalized, but there are other interactions like a high five or a fist bump or that kind of thing, or just a smile, um, and building that rapport through other means that doesn't have to require physical touch. Betsy, what do you want to add?
I would just add that I think sometimes just, sitting down and having a conversation with the other parents in your extended family. So your, in-laws and everything, and just saying, "Hey, let's all agree on something so we don't have to have this conversation that then in turns because like, oh no, they don't have to hug you." I can totally see how you're like, "I was not being creepy. I just love these kids and wanted to give them a hug," right? So I think having that conversation ahead of time so everybody kind of understands the extended family if possible, right? We all know conversations with larger extended family do not always go smoothly, but just trying to set that so there aren't those feelings or discomfort then when the situations come up that everybody's on the same page.
Absolutely. Thank you for stopping me, Kelly. Any other
Yeah.
questions at this point that we can pause and jump into?
Just a follow up, I mean, with a different person. I think you just barely answered it, but she just said, how do you address while educating parents to place boundaries between their children and the adults they fully trust? And you were just talking about that. So I'm hoping that answered her question. Ileana, if it didn't, let me know. But I think that that's what you were just saying, is to talk to them ahead of time and, and let them know that that's what you're trying to do with your children. So.
I think another appropriate example is my kids played a lot of sports. And so when it came time for them to start a new sport or be on a new team, it was having a conversation with the coach in advance and just saying, hey, if my son ever needs a ride home, please just call me and let me know. I'm happy to come and get him. Or just communicating some of those values in advance. Please make sure that I'm looped in on the group me with my child when you're communicating with them, and just setting some of those expectations outside of family boundaries as well. So in like coaching settings like that. Betsy?
I would just say if everyone took this class, then everyone would have the same language to talk about this.
Absolutely. All right, let's jump back into using assertive
Okay.
communication.
Sorry, I'm just going crazy moving your slides, Karen. Hold on. There you go.
This could look like pulling the individual aside, explaining the boundaries for your child and why they are important, and asking them to support you in those boundaries, which is exactly what we were just talking about. An example of this conversation could look like, I understand that you need to send updates and reminders to my son about church activities in the future. Please make sure to CC me on all texts, emails, or other communication you send to him. I would really appreciate it. Another example, thank you for driving our kid home from soccer practice. Next time, call to ask first so we can get more details, including who else will be in the car. We've noticed that during your last few visits, you've been going into our child's bedroom and closing the door without us knowing. We appreciate that you want to spend quality time with her. However, in the future, let us know what you're doing and leave the door open. If the individual who did the behavior innocently, they will likely be very apologetic. If the individual is a perpetrator, they will be put on high alert. While it is important to identify and confront concerning behavior, it is equally important to be proactive. For example, during the first meeting with a new soccer coach, you can communicate your family's boundaries, exactly like what I was just saying, before any red flags occur. Does anyone have any other examples of proactivity in setting a boundary that you'd like to share? You can come off of mute or drop it in the chat.
I have a really quick question. At some point in time, it would be interested in like teaching my kids to also just like advocate for themselves in this as well. And so at what point in time, like at what age do you think that kids are generally old enough to also just be like be interacting and like setting their own boundaries for themselves?
Betsy, I'll let you take that one.
I think from the get-go in age-appropriate ways. So back to where we were talking kind of at the little break about giving choices and kids being able to say no to, with your toddler who's saying no to everything, giving him an opportunity to say no to something that you're good with them saying no to. But I think we do that all the way through. And I think not swooping in, there's that balance between keeping your kids safe and then also teaching them the skills to be able to say, no, you know what, I'm going to call my mom to get a ride, or, things like that. So we want to keep building them up, because if suddenly at age 16, we're like, you need to have these skills and we haven't done the scaffolding for that, then they're going to struggle. So I don't know, I have two daughters in their 20s, and it was hard raising them, right? Balancing wanting to keep them safe and also how do we have them also speak up and really getting that balance with kids. And so it's hard, but I think it's from the get-go, you're training that.
I think I see some other comments in the chat. I've let adults in my life know that my children are not to be tickled. Set house rules about use of the rooms in the house when people visit. Yeah, we did that as well. My son just joined a new sports team. His coach said in the parent meeting, I will do as much as I can for your child to succeed, but one thing I will not do is give your child a ride to or from the game. So sincerely appreciated that comment. If my children want to be tickled, they will ask. And then we have a rule that once someone says stop, it is immediately over. Also, if playing together, sometimes just ask, is everyone still having fun? As kind of a check-in. Great comments.
We did get a follow-up, with the one that, I was talking about before. She said that she was thinking about very naive parents who trust their religious leaders or their best friend's husband. Parents who do not see the need, how do you work with that?
Uh, One of the things I've done, and Betsy, I want you to weigh in, is use us. Like you guys are all in this training today. So what you can do is, oh, hey, I was just in this training and I just learned this thing and I want to share it with you. As you share more of the things you learned today in this training with the group of parents that you interact with personally, as well as professionally, that way it kind of gives you an entree into the conversation and say, oh, I need to tell you about this training I was in today and about how setting boundaries is really important and just share some of the examples that maybe we talked about. I think that's always a great way. Um, I think that's probably the best way I've brought it up with other people is, oh, I read this article. I wanted to tell you about it. Or I saw this social post that was so interesting. I think you'd be interested in it as well. Let me tell you about it. So I have found that to be helpful. Betsy?
Oh, I agree, Karen. Yeah. And that saying, I read something or I was on Saprea's website and it made me really think, wow, sometimes I really trust people. Um, and maybe I need to, and not saying distrust them, but maybe I need to go into things with my eyes wide open and really look at different behaviors. And that really got me thinking.
Mhm. I think awareness is such an important part of our mission. I don't know if we shared this last time, I don't remember, but over half of children who report sexual abuse are abused by other children or someone under the age of 18. And so sharing the stats, like getting to understand the issue, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 10 boys will be sexually abused before the age of 18. Sharing that information, that starts to open people up to, oh, this is happening. Oh, okay. Like sometimes to the point about a naive parent who really maybe has grown up in a really kind of protected space, just assume that everybody grew up in a protected space and so aren't anticipating what a risky situation really looks like because maybe they haven't had to deal with something like that. But let's see, a couple of comments. We firmly repeat that stop means stop and no means no, no matter who it is. Love that. Another comment, I'd be very suspicious of a religious leader or adult that doesn't agree with taking simple steps for preventing child abuse. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, jumping back into our slides, the right to say no. Another way to support your child's confidence and sense of safety is to teach them about their rights and boundaries as individuals. And I think we've been having a really great discussion about this. This includes teaching them about the boundaries they are entitled to, for example, body privacy, giving high fives instead of hugs, as well as respecting the boundaries of others. Allow children to set limits on these displays rather than forcing them to show affection a certain way. Again, a common example is not forcing a child to give a hug. Instead, invite them to give a fist bump, a high five, or another display of affection that feels safer and more comfortable to them. Another example would be if someone wants to touch them anywhere normally covered by a swimming suit. Teach your child they have the right to privacy, the right to say no in any situation that makes them feel unsafe or uncomfortable, and the right to tell an adult to stop and to report any behavior that concerns them to a trusted adult. Doing so will not get them in trouble. Again, we want to emphasize that the burden of abuse should never be placed on children. However, understanding personal boundaries increases the odds of a child recognizing and reporting when their boundaries have been violated. It also decreases the odds of a child or youth violating the boundaries of others. And I think that's such an important component of boundaries, of teaching boundaries, is that a lot of times parents will enter into those conversations to keep their kids safe from being victimized, but it works both ways. It helps kids recognize, oh, that's not okay for me, and it's not okay for them either. Like I shouldn't be doing that or saying that or putting that person in that situation either, because it's not okay for me and it's not okay for them. So helping them recognize and respect the boundaries of others. Another way to support your child's growth and emotional well-being is to teach and model healthy online boundaries. The ultimate goal of these boundaries is not to restrict or to catch your child doing something wrong. Rather, these boundaries can help children learn to self-regulate their internet and social media use, while also allowing them the space to build their intuition, autonomy, and literacy skills in the digital era. And here are a few tools that can help. Educate children about digital citizenship. Discuss with your child what a digital footprint is and how the permanence of what they post online can impact future opportunities and relationships. Talk about the importance of privacy, safety, and authenticity, particularly in terms of the content a youth creates and what identity they present to others. Give kids a say. Setting strict rules without getting input from your kids can backfire. Have a conversation where you explain how important their well-being is to you and together create a plan to keep them safe. If your kids have a say in the rules, they'll be more likely to follow them. Not only that, but you're fostering the good habit of building trust, communication, and accountability. It's hard. I'm going to just throw that out there. It is hard. Giving kids a say. Sometimes my husband will say, we've given them way too much say, like, because it's just this balance of back and forth, trying to ensure that they understand why the rule has to be in place. They understand the impact it can have on them. But it's a really important component of setting these boundaries. Offer care and support. With grooming, the goal is to isolate the victim from other sources of support. However, such attempts will prove more difficult if parents are actively involved in their child's life, offering continual affection, care, and support. These protective factors can help boost a child's self-esteem as well as strengthen their sense of safety and boundaries. Now that we've discussed several examples of boundaries you can teach your children, let's pause here for a moment to consider this question. What boundaries are important to you? What boundaries have you found effective in your own life? And what boundaries would you like to model and teach your children based on your family's values, needs, and culture? So just take a minute. You can put your responses in the chat or feel free to come off mute.
There's a question in our Q&A that Angel is asking, at what point do we need to assess the need of our children to learn about boundaries, which I think we kind of talked about, but she goes on to say, and let them develop their own experience regarding intimacy, sexuality, or body communication within human interaction.
Thank you.
I think she's asking. And she's wondering at what point does that
At what
part
point?
of it, does that point, does that part of it come in? Obviously, if we're starting boundaries at 2 and 3 and 4, we're
Yeah.
not talking about sexuality, but at what point does that aspect come in?
Yeah, Betsy.
So I would say we're talking about sexuality from birth on. It's just got different human beings are healthy sexuality is part of who we are, but we tend to not really call it that when we're talking about, this is your body. You're not shaming a child who, an infant who grabs their genitals and things like that. I think as we get into The older ages, then these are conversations that are based on your family values and beliefs and things like that. You know, how I approach sexuality with my children may be very different than how Karen approaches it with hers, but both of us are approaching it from you matter, you have boundaries, you get to make decisions. These are our family values around this, and not from a shame standpoint. Not like an answer to say this, but certainly as children are getting, they're dating, they're things like this. These are ongoing conversations about our values, your safety, your body image, all of these kind of things. So I wish I had just like an answer, but I think again, it's those ongoing conversations. But these are incredibly important as children are getting into middle school and high school and things like that.
I think too, if it's okay if I add to what you're saying,
Would love it.
that so often is the case that our kids are already thinking about this and talking about it with their friends, and we don't realize it yet. So, let's not wait until they talk to us, because that may not happen. So, just knowing that it's happening before we even know it's happening.
Yeah, excellent point.
Absolutely. And we want to, as parents, kind of be preparing the path, making sure that they continually are coming to us for questions. If they've heard something at school, like that was probably some of the funniest conversations we've had in our family. Is my boys in particular would come home and they'd say a word, and I say, "Oh, that's an interesting word. Do you know what it means? Where, like, who said, like, where did you hear that word?" Like, and so then we would talk about it. They'd tell me what they thought it meant. I was like, "Oh, it doesn't quite mean that, but let me tell you what it means." And so then it was a safe space where they could explore new words, new concepts, new ideas that they are being exposed to. And they knew we would always tell them, like we want them, we want to be their Google, right? We don't want them to go to Google. We want to be their Google.
I was exposed to that very early with my first child when she came home and said, "Hey, Mom, what's a blowjob?" And I was a very young parent, but I learned from that, and I was glad that she came and talked to me. And so from then on, I tried to cultivate that, and thank her for coming and asking me. And I will always tell you the truth. So, but it was quite a shocker.
Yeah, my poor kids, I'm like, "What else do you want to know?" And they're like, "That's enough. I'm good." And they like wander away. And I'm like, "No, I'm happy to tell you whatever you want to know." So let's move on to our next slide, creating a family safety plan. So this is another helpful strategy to do this ahead of time. And I want to give everyone a few minutes to brainstorm answers to each of the questions on the safety plan worksheet. And I had dropped it earlier in the chat. I'll drop it again. And I apologize, some of you are struggling to access that. Hopefully this document is a little easier to access. So we'll take just a few minutes to go through that. Um, the final box is about reporting, and we'll discuss that towards the end of the training today, so hold off on filling that in. But if you'll just take a few minutes to look through that and think about what responses you would have and how you would fill that out. This is a tool you can use with parents that you're working with, um, and for your own personal situation. The topics included on this safety plan include personal boundaries. What boundaries can I set for my child or teen's interactions with adults and peers? Online boundaries. What boundaries can I set for my child or teen's social media, internet use, and texting? Open communication. How will I respond if my youth crosses identified boundaries? And then support network. Who can my child or teen talk to if they've had an uncomfortable experience that could potentially lead to abuse, or if they have already experienced abuse? So for those who may not be able to access the document, those are the different boxes that we're working on here. And it looks like I put a not great link in there, so everybody's editing the same document. I apologize to everybody. Normally, the person that helps us with these links is not with us today, and you can tell that it shows.
Sorry.
All right, let's go ahead. Is there anybody who would feel comfortable sharing something that they wrote down? I'm going to just try to drop this in the chat so that you can see what the different boxes are and the different questions. If I were faster, I would ninja a better copy of that document, but I'm afraid I might mess up and lose contact with the Zoom link. And so any comments about the safety plan? Any thoughts that you had as you were looking at those different topics?
And I think this is a great one to use with the parents and families you work with and say, hey, let's talk about this. This is an important topic. You can even say, I went to a training and we talked about this, and I think this is interesting.
There was a comment from Veronica. I would like to review it with my teen and have their input so we have agreements. I love that collaborative. Because that's always, I get some of the best responses like, what do you think we should do in this situation? How do you think you should manage that? As you continue to think through those different topics on the safety plan, here are a couple of examples of how to put your family safety plan into action. One family shared that if their son is ever at a friend's house where sexually explicit media is being shown, their safety plan is to have him text a code word to his parents that lets them know to come and get him and or to talk to his friend's parents. Another family shared that they contact their daughter's coach before she travels overnight with her high school volleyball team. They establish clear boundaries with the coach. They request contact information from all the adults who will be present on the trip and discuss what safeguards will be in place for unsupervised time between older and younger players on the team. They then have their daughter call them every few hours during the trip just to check in. Other examples could be providing the child with a list of safe, trusted adults to reach out to if they are in a scary or uncomfortable situation, having continual discussions about family boundaries and values with a youth as they start dating or using more social media, or keeping important hotlines nearby to seek help and or report abuse. So continue to think about those situations that would apply to you and your family and how the safety plan can help to mitigate those risks and how you might be able to use the safety plan as you work with the parents that you work with. So I'm going to turn the time over to Betsy now. Thank you for the discussion and your comments.
So now we're going to shift a little bit about how do I respond if sexual abuse has happened? And Again, I'm reminding you this is information we're teaching to parents, so I know a lot of our attendees today, you are well versed in mandatory reporting. But if you fall into that category, look at this content through the lens of educating and supporting families and how you can impart this information onto other people. Because we know that how parents and society respond to abuse plays a key role in the severity of the ongoing impact of trauma. And when we look at things like adverse childhood experiences or ACEs and toxic stress response, research shows that addressing current stressors and enhancing networks of these safe and stable and nurturing relationships and environments, this is associated long-term with decreased metabolic, immunologic, neuroendocrine, inflammatory dysregulation, and improved physical and psychological health. So basically, how parents and communities react to a child's disclosure is very important. And one of the things I always see at the Saprea retreat, and I've heard it so many times over the last 10 and a half years, is women say, the negative response when I disclosed as a child was long-term as bad as the abuse. And I feel so strongly about educating parents so they don't do further damage. And I know we've all heard the stories of caregivers who say things like when a child discloses abuse, like, what did you do to cause this? Or this just happens to girls in our family, move on, or don't ever speak of this again. And this shame and ongoing stress from these types of reactions carries on well into adulthood with lasting impacts on physical and mental health, hence what the ACEs show us. So back to what we teach in our curriculum to try to prevent this type of damage. Sometimes, despite our best prevention efforts, abuse still happens, and it's important to be prepared on responding to sexual abuse if it has happened. And we're going to look at how to establish trust with a child or teen and ask neutral questions. And then next, we'll go through the mandatory reporting process and how to seek professional help. And then lastly, we'll just take a quick look at school and Utah policy considerations. And when we talk about reporting, again, this bottom part of this family safety plan, you can think about that, which focuses on how to report. So, starting with establishing trust. Because sexual abuse is experienced in secret and often carries with it a sense of shame, children may feel the abuse is somehow their fault and that they brought it on themselves or encouraged it in some way. They may not know where to turn for help, especially if the abuser is a family member. And if you have a suspicion that abuse is occurring, or if a youth discloses to you, it is important for you to emphasize safety with the child, but also that it is not the child's fault if they find themselves in a place or a situation where an adult abuses them. The responsibility always falls on the adult who committed these terrible acts, and children are in no way to blame. And when a youth discloses sexual abuse, your reaction plays an important part in whether the youth will continue to confide or will shut off. Youth will pick up on everything from our mannerisms to our attentiveness or lack thereof, and potentially judge themselves as guilty or dirty according to how they feel parents and guardians perceive them. So parents should try not to shame a child by any conversation or explanation of the abuse. And it's important to learn what to say and what not to say. And parents and guardians should actively listen as the child shares experiences and ask yourselves, am I showing care and love, or am I quick to cast aside their experiences in response to my own uncomfortable feelings? Because absolutely, this brings up uncomfortable feelings for a parent and an adult. And there's a few ways to establish trust and open up the lines of communication with youth using trauma-informed language. And when we're trauma-informed, we realize the impact a traumatic experience can have on someone's well-being and are intentional in trying not to re-traumatize them further. So we're going to go over some do's and don'ts when it comes to responding in a trauma-informed way if something has already happened. So these are the do's. Help them feel comfortable. You can give them a comfort object or a comfortable, safe place to sit. Use active listening, and this can also involve saying, "Okay, what do you need from me? What can we do right now?" Let them know that they've done the right thing by telling you. Reassure them that the abuse is not their fault. Use terms and language they can understand, and confirm the validity of their feelings. Help them understand you're taking them seriously and that they do not have to carry this burden alone. And then explain what you'll do next so they know what's coming. Do not interview them. CJC knows this well. Allow law enforcement and professionals to do that. And then this can be a hard one for parents, especially those who may have a history of sexual trauma themselves, where this disclosure may feel really overwhelming and triggering. But do not react with shock, anger, or disgust. Don't force a youth to talk or show injuries. Don't teach them new terms or words. Speak clearly and simply. And then, of course, don't blame the abuse on them or suggest that they should have done something different to prevent the abuse from happening. And basically, above all, be a supportive presence who is honest and caring and calm. So asking neutral, non-leading questions can foster a safe, trauma-informed environment in which your child can share the details they need to. And these questions shift the focus from what is wrong with you to what happened to you. And that is that focus we want, like, Dave Perry says in his book, what happened to you is our focus. So looking at this, instead of saying, oh, it was your coach, wasn't it? See how that's a leading question? It could be a neutral question, something like, can you tell me what happened? Instead of, did this happen last week at school? You can have the neutral question, when did this happen? Can you remember the day or time? A leading question would be, were you doing something that made them think this is something you wanted? This is also a shaming question. A neutral question would be, hey, what was going on before this happened? And instead of, they touched your private parts under your clothing, didn't they? Which you can see is very leading. You could say, can you describe what they did? And again, I know a lot of people in our audience today have significant experience in how to talk to children, but this really can be a challenge, especially for parents when emotions are running high. And so this is one of the activities we do in practice, rephrasing leading questions to take them to more neutral. And so I'm going to go ahead. You can go off mute and say a neutral rephrase, or you can type one into the chat. But what's a better way than saying you were alone with him even though you knew better, right? Any thoughts?
The comment was anyone else around?
Yeah.
Blaming the
Yeah.
victim. Who was there when this happened? Can you tell me who was there when this happened?
Right. Yeah. And that, even though you knew better, right, is that blaming the victim and is shaming in there too. Yeah. What about, I need to know what threat she made to keep you quiet? How could we change that to neutral?
Do you remember what was said?
Yep. What about, this has happened before, hasn't it?
Another response to the other, can you tell me more about what was said? What she
Yeah.
said? Can you tell me what she said? How did that make you feel?
Yeah.
Has anything like this happened before?
Yeah.
Was this the first time you've experienced this?
Yeah.
How can I help you? Have you been in this situation before?
Right. Right. Beautiful. Thank you. And again, these are just right on spot with what everyone was saying. All right, so let's touch base real quick on mandatory reporting because we present to parents the laws around mandatory reporting. And unfortunately, this is something that's often not well known. So we want to definitely talk about it. In Utah, all adults are legally obligated to report suspected abuse or trafficking, not just teachers, social workers, or police. And if a parent has reason to believe that the child is or has been the subject of abuse or neglect, or observes a child being subjected to conditions or circumstances that would reasonably result in abuse or neglect, that person shall immediately report the suspected abuse or neglect to the division or to the nearest peace officer or law enforcement agency. And there is an added importance for parents and guardians to report as they are in a position of power and trust and have a responsibility to protect their children. And mandatory reporting requirement is described for those of you in Utah State Code sections 53E6701 and 80-2-602, mandatory reporting of physical or sexual abuse of students. And if a parent suspects a child is being or has been sexually abused, that person should immediately call Utah's 24-hour child protection line. This hotline makes it easy to share concerns about a youth with a trained social worker. A person does not need to be certain abuse has occurred to call. And we tell parents to, feel free to add this number to the final section of their family safety plan. And we also encourage them to add the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And then we finally encourage people, take out your cell phones, add these numbers so they're there if you ever need them. I hope you don't ever need them, but if you hear something concerning and you need to share it with someone, you'll have those handy. And then we teach parents that when you call the abuse hotline, they need to try to have as much information on hand as possible, including the child's first and last name, date of birth, if they have that, the address of the school or child care provider, and the nature of the concern. So the more information they have, the better. Obviously, you're not always going to know a child's date of birth or things like that, but certainly if it is their own child, they will know that. And we teach that the system is set up to handle an investigation in a way that considers the well-being of the youth. And by following the appropriate steps for reporting, chances are the youth will not be subjected to multiple interviews, and the case will remain strong and untainted by outside influences. And unless the person reporting the abuse is the parent of the child who was subjected to the abuse, they will not have the legal rights to further details. And you can also work to set up a child protection team as detailed in Utah Code 80-1-10211. And then we also talk about why do you think it's important to follow the appropriate steps in reporting? And I just think it's really important for the community to understand the reasons that we have procedures in place. And of course, also wonderful places like the Children's Justice Center to help serve these kiddos. And then part of the healing process is seeking professional help. Just as you would seek help from a doctor for a severe injury or illness, seeking help from mental health providers is essential to healing from the trauma of child sexual abuse. And remember, this professional help is not only for your child, but also for you and any other members of the family who have been impacted. And these professionals who understand the potential psychological, emotional, behavioral impacts of sexual abuse, they can guide you on the necessary steps to take, provide services for the child, and make referrals to additional programs and services, and offer support for the entire family. And above all else, children can heal from sexual abuse and go on to live healthy, fulfilling lives, especially when they have a loving and supportive parent like you in their corner. And professionally, I always really stress this to parents because in my work with child sexual abuse survivors, I often hear survivors say that their biggest fear is that their child will also be sexually abused, which I completely understand. And I always validate this fear, but I also provide reassurance that with the right support and team in place, if anything should ever happen to their child, it doesn't have to turn out like it did for them, because as a caring parent, they are the ones that can make that difference and get those supports in place for their kid. Policy considerations, we always touch on these, that each school has procedures and prevention policies set in place to protect against abuse or human trafficking. And for example, some school policies cover digital safety measures, which involve monitoring of school-provided devices. And restricting private electronic communications between staff and students. And this helps prevent online grooming and inappropriate contact. Another school policy relates to clear reporting procedures to raise concerns, including documentation on who students can approach with and clear chains of communication to relevant authorities. And these ensure swift action when issues arrive while maintaining appropriate confidentiality. And parents and guardians can educate themselves on schools' programs and work closely with school officials to reinforce these practices at home. And these coordinated efforts in both the school and the home environments, they can provide a clear and unified discussion of abuse, its terminology and signs, and proper ways to report when one suspects abuse. And this presentation reflects the latest research and clinical expertise around the topic of child sexual abuse. And as Karen said earlier, it also adheres to the Utah State Code and school board rulings shown in this slide, because as she said, there were pretty stringent requirements for this. And so in summary, child sexual abuse is common and it's every adult's responsibility to keep youth safe. Child sexual abuse can happen to both girls and boys. It's typically perpetrated by someone the child or family knows. And by educating yourself about things like grooming patterns, physical and behavioral signs of abuse, risk factors, and vulnerable groups, and these were some of these things we touched on in part 1 we discussed, but you can be better equipped to protect children. And we talked about the 4 ways parents can help educate sexual abuse is to talk with and listen to their child, educate their child on sexual development and what constitutes as harmful behaviors, monitor their activities in person and online, and support them through setting boundaries and teaching the right to say no. Remember to respond, not to react when you hear something from a child that might be concerning. This will help them to feel safe and open up to you. And lastly, be aware of how to report child sexual abuse to prevent further abuse and jumpstart the child's healing journey. So that is the conclusion that we teach to parents in this class. And then I have just a little add-on, which is my conclusion for all of you here today. We have a personal and professional responsibility to change the narrative in society about child sexual abuse. And we talk openly about so many of the other risks children face, and we encourage prevention.
Calm down, Harper.
So things like seatbelts and gun safety and bullying, we talk about all those things. But when it comes to child sexual abuse, we really fall short in our communities. And not talking about sexual abuse prevention adds to the shame and the stigma associated with it.
You literally checked this out in the middle of.
So that kind of sums us up. If you want to know more about how to prevent child sexual abuse, Saprea has many resources available in English, Spanish, French, and German, and you can check it out by scanning this QR code. We also, of course, have our healing services and resources, so things like our free 4-day retreat, our online healing webinar, our support groups, and online resources. So please check out both our healing and our prevention information. And these are some other organizations in Utah that have information and resources related to preventing child sexual abuse. And you can always check out the Utah Division of Child and Family Services webpage, as well as download the Safe Utah app. And then we have a whole lot of our references there. All right.
We've got
Yes,
a few
Karen.
minutes. If there's anybody that has any questions that didn't get answered, we're happy to answer any questions
Yeah.
for the next.
I'm gonna
Cyrus.
start that off with just one in the chat, and then people can join, with theirs. So somebody's asking, how do you help a client who in their 60s start seeing their mother as an ally to the abuser? What would you say to that?
Oh, I would say there's a lot to unpack and process there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say go slowly, right? Because they're very much maybe changing how they saw this relationship, which really That's really impactful. I would go slowly with a whole lot of grounding and focus on safety. But
Yeah,
that's hard to suddenly have them see that if that's to say I've spent my lifetime with this one narrative and now I'm seeing something different. That can really kind of rock somebody's world.
yeah. Yeah, I thought that was a pretty good question. And I think
Yeah.
that happens more times than we realize, when you all of a sudden are seeing it in a different light.
But I'm going to say power to somebody in their 60s for working on this because it is never too late
Right,
to work on our trauma.
exactly. While we're waiting for other questions, please look at the chat right now. There's the link. Just want you guys to see that. It's right there. There's a message right there giving you that link. Make sure that you spell your email address correctly because that's where that certificate will go. So if you misspell it, it won't get to you. So, any other questions? This has been amazing, you guys. I mean, we knew it would anyway, but just such a great follow-up, and so much added information. So we're getting lots of comments in the chat. And just thanks for this, how great it is. So, but if anybody has any more questions, we do have a few more minutes. You can unmute too. So.
Will we be able to have a copy of the PowerPoint as well?
Yeah, we can make that available. I believe it's a pretty big file. So let me figure out how we can make that available. We do offer a free training where we walk you through just the different ways of teaching this content and issue awareness. And you can access that training through our website. Let me drop my email in the chat and you can reach out to me directly. And we provide a Dropbox link in that training, I believe, where you can get the PowerPoint and all the flyers that go with it to be able to deliver this education.
That's awesome.
Perfect. Thank you.
We do have a question in the chat. Are there any outreach to daycare centers about these types of trainings?
We are outreaching to the whole state. So if you have a connection to a daycare center that you would like to have this education shared with, we would love to be connected.
Absolutely. I think that's the key for people to get that, get your information to them if you feel like there's somebody that could use that. So I think that's a great idea. Okay. And yes, as far as handouts, we'll send whatever you give to us. So
Okay.
we'll get that out to our attendees. I know that they
I'll
love.
get you the right links, Kelly.
Yes. Yeah, we'll make sure those go out because what amazing handouts those are for us. I was looking over that. I thought this is so great. And we work, I mean, here, I work with a lot of kids, but we also work with their parents. And so what great conversations we can have and filling those out. So I'm excited about that. Okay. Well, if there aren't any other questions, we could end a little early. That's crazy, right? We don't ever end trainings early, but that might be nice for people that need to get on